Have you got 10 minutes? Of course you do. Whether you are easing yourself off to sleep or gently waking up for the day, here are 10 tales for tired adults to send you on your merry way. Tale the third, the Cull. Once upon a time, long before there were ways and methods for travelling not only to the next village or country, but all over the world in the fragment of a moment, and many years before we could speak into our distant lover's ear as intimately as the sea whispering its secrets through a shell, there was a discreet village with a pond so deep that the villagers believed it to be bottomless. For many years, fathers had passed the legend of the bottomless pond down to their sons, telling fearsome tales of the reckless and adventurous souls who had sent down long ropes and chains, and once even themselves, into the shadowy blue shade of the pond, all in the hope of finding the bottom. For it was assumed that great treasures and valuable minerals must surely lie in such obscure depths. However, in spite of this belief, no man had stepped close to the pond for many generations, believing its swirling realms to contain not only fatal dangers, poisonous water perhaps, or merfolk, or simply everyday drowning, but also something so dark and different to their world that to spy it would be to be changed immeasurably. As such, they could only stare long and hard, hoping to unravel its exoticism from a safe distance. Meanwhile, the mothers of the village only passed one thing on to their daughters: a roll of their eyes whenever the menfolk traipsed the long road from home to the pond to ponder its mystery. Yet despite their aloofness, it was generally agreed that it was good for the men to get out of the house and away from being underfoot, and so it had been for generations. One day, the day before his coming-of-age day, a boy, sick with having to peer over his father's shoulder or crouch to see the pond through the tree-thick legs of the thronging menfolk, pushed squarely through the shuffling circle and began to inch steadily down the incline which led to the banks of the pond. So strange and quick was this moment that the men seemed to perceive it in slow motion, and soon the boy was far closer to the water's edge than any had been since that poor soul fell in all of those years ago.
"Watch out, boy!"
cried his father, alarmed. He could taste the green tang of jealousy, too, although he did not recognize it until later.
"He's too bold, your son,"
said his neighbour. The father bristled silently. "He's young and headstrong," said another. "Come back, you fool, you'll get yourself killed."
"Or us,"
added the neighbour.
"Come back, lad,"
added his father, deciding to take charge.
"Remember what I told you about old Naz."
"Bless his soul," they all muttered, touching their hearts and shivering at the memory of the older ones and the story, the sons and their babes. A man ever staring at the surface, never turning or crying out for help. He wasn't quick enough, but slipping silently through the water's reflection as smoothly as a hot poker into caramel. "I'm fine," muttered the boy at last. "I just want a closer look." The boy sat back on his heels and looked up and around. It was another beautiful day. The sky was that perfect shade of blue which periwinkles above a remembered beach day, and the old sun gazed down in golden splendour like a proud and aged king, rippling its pleasure across the green grass and bright flowers, even those trampled by the feet of the men. But the day had no effect on the boy. Already he had turned his gaze back to the pond and was reaching out a questing finger to touch the water. "Careful," uttered some of the men in a rippling whisper. "What if he gets drawn in?"
"We should get the ropes. Could tip over."
There was a quiet gasp as the boy pulled his finger back undamaged.
"Best grab him,"
said his father to himself.
"That's enough, boy. Come along now."
he added weakly, seeing the boy still gazing into the water. In fact, he was now leaning forward, almost nose to ripple. His father stepped forward. "Stop," said the boy, and raised himself up to his full height. The men looked on. The boy seemed somewhat impressive, standing alone at the water's edge, and somehow taller than he had seemed before. They were nowhere near him, but they fell back as one. "Silence, father," he added, seeing his father begin to compose a word of warning. "Listen, all of you. We have been told that this pond is bottomless," he began, in a voice much grander than his own. "Many have told us of this or warned us. We have all heard the stories. Yet I can confirm today that it is not. This pond is not bottomless. Not only does it have a bottom, but there is someone at the other side looking back." There was a long silence.
"Nonsense,"
cried the neighbour, breaking the spell. All at once the men began their shuffling circle once more, laughing and snuffling as one. But the boy just watched this gravely. "See for yourself," he said, and waved his hand idly as though to suggest it meant nothing to him at all. He stepped to one side, and his eyes came to light upon the eyes of his neighbour. The neighbour stepped forward, now a little timid. He edged down the hill, the boy and his father standing solemnly to one side. For his father was part of it now, no matter his feelings on the subject. His boy had spoken with a man's voice, and he had felt himself age an eon in that moment. The neighbour lowered himself to the water's edge. At first he saw only the surface, shining in the bouncing rays of the sun. Then, as his eyes began to relax, he realized there were acres of water stretching out before him, as though filling a long tunnel, swirling and rippling with greenery and drifting fish, little shells, heaps of shining stones upon the little ledges of colour that was not, as it first seemed, blue-black, but in fact contained multiple shades of myriad colours which echoed and reflected like a snake's scales in twilight. Beyond that, an indistinct shape, a large moving clump of darkness that obscured the moon beyond it. There was no doubt. It was a man. It was a stranger. The man peered frowningly into the pond a little longer. Soon he could see the hateful urgency in the stranger's eyes, and at this he sat back in shock and rose unsteadily. His knees were not what they once were.
"Well?"
demanded the father impatiently. It had occurred to him throughout this display, as the villagers stood awkwardly around him, eyes either on him or the boy, that once, many years ago now, the boy had shown quite a propensity for lying. "Well," began the man, "the boy's somewhat right. There's certainly something, maybe someone down there." He was loath to agree outright. The day was so bright and the boy was so young. Nonetheless, the thought of the stranger's eyes, glinting with rage and fear, filled him with dread. "Well, what? Is there a threat to the village?" cried the toymaker's husband, known for his military precision.
"Are we in danger?"
added the baker's husband, ever watchful. The man shrugged lightly.
"You can say, I saw no weapons. We shall have to confirm."
"And leave ourselves in danger? Endanger the village? The women?" It was becoming a flurry of voices. The neighbour tried to return to his favoured viewing spot, but the men would not allow him to climb the hill. "Look at the boy," cried another voice. "This man is afraid and is too cowardly to admit the danger. Let us look to the boy." The men turned as one. The boy had mounted a nearby hummock of earth and stood eye to eye with them, his face red and adamant. "I think," he began softly, "that this man is a coward." The neighbour smiled expansively, but his smile was not returned. not by anyone. Even the sun hid its face behind a cloud. At this, the boy's father felt his earlier worries evaporate and stepped forward.
It is clear to us all by now that this village is at an immense risk. Is that correct, boy?
The boy nodded. Then we know what we must do, called out the toy maker's husband. All the men squared their shoulders and their jaws.
Come on, affirmative!
And I think we also know that someone here is a traitor, said the boy in a near whisper. Not one of you others hate your village, your country, as he does. Isn't that true? There was nodding all around.
Affirmative!
I didn't say...
Silence, added the boy in a grave voice. Two truths are immediately apparent. Firstly, that we will brook no traitors. Secondly, that we must take action against this alien threat, this other.
How will it be done, my son?
Asked his father through moist lips. Let the villagers decide, replied the boy. They know best. Destruction? Said one. Others nodded.
Explosives, said another.
Destroy the traitor, muttered someone, though it was never clear who. The men turned their faces to their upstart leader as one. The boy had seemingly grown another foot since his last words, and had become a young man with the means and the strength of a new king. Some flicked tears from their eyes or pressed their hands to their hearts in solidarity. The boy nodded his head and turned away. At that, the pond was surrounded by a ripple of activity as the boy's father gave out jobs and praise, and the neighbour found himself instantly held by 4 strong men. Meanwhile, over in the village, a woman took her eye from the telescope, shook her head and her hands, and hastened, drenched in flour, to the town hall. I seek the elder mother, she cried as she hurried in, trying to straighten her apron. A girl gestured to the lecture hall, and on she scurried. Mother, she cried as she entered the long hall where hundreds of girls sat at long desks, pens scratching but otherwise in silence. Mother, it's happening again. Hush yourself, Eleonora, replied a tall grey woman who stood beneath the large clock, as upright as a spring elm. Were you born in a barn? She added, taking in the woman's appearance with a frown. Well, yes, mother, replied Eleanor doubtfully. We all were. Yes, said mother. It's a figure of speech. You are trailing flour all over and disturbing the girls. With a gentle wave she gestured to her young charges, for not only was she the elder of the village, but also the schoolteacher, postwoman, and flag designer, just as Eleonora was the chief lookout and also the head baker, her position at the edge of the village being ideal for not only sighting danger, but also the loud ovens. Sorry, replied Eleonora, but I come in haste. Mother, it is happening again. Yes, replied Mother. Yes, I know. She led Eleonora to the high window from which they could spy the distant flurry of activity on the hill beside the pond. The 2 women gazed in silence for a moment. Those men and their silly war games, added Mother, with a long sigh, her voice strangely idle. I'm not sure what you think they're capable of. I didn't have time to think, Mother, replied Eleonora. Just do my work. But, she added, wiping her floured hands at last, that young boy's with them. He's a nasty piece of work. True, replied Mother. Give it time, my dear. Whatever action they take won't teach them anything anyway. Well now, she added, suddenly clapping her hands together. Don't you have something in the oven? Eleonora swore and hurried away again without a word. As she rushed out of the elegant building, along the smooth, wide pavement, past the beautiful houses where laughter tinkled through windows and music played, she spied the men climbing back up the distant hill, pushing great wagons of ammunition, long spears, and other such items they had amassed over time, just in case something of this sort might occur. Some of them had tied sashes across their bodies, and several wore tin pans on their heads. One tugged a sheet from a washing line to wear as a cloak. For goodness sake, she muttered to herself, knowing there was no time to stop and warn them. She had the village's bread near burning in the ovens. Well, I'd done my part, and she thought no more of it. Back in the schoolroom, the elder stood at the window and drank her tea, gazing across the fine green foliage of the forest and up into the clear and heavenly sky. The girls wrote on in silence. Suddenly the church bells began to ring, and she smiled at the familiar rippling patterns. Half an hour until lunch. Later there would be music and play and perhaps a walk amongst the trees. All at once, a vast puff of black smoke rose from the depths of the forest, and the building rocked a little. Seconds after, the sound of the explosion rang out and broke the golden sounds of the church bells in two. The girls looked up in alarm, but Mother only smiled darkly. Another Cull, been and gone, she thought to herself. She put down her teacup. I suppose it's time to buy another mirror. That was The Cull by E. Braidwood, one of my 10 tales for tired adults, and quite a dark one, don't you think? If you enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe to hear more, and thank you for listening.